Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston, this is Station. I am ready.
Brooke Army Medical Center, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call Station for a voice check.
Station, this is Brooke Army Medical Center. How do you hear me?
Brooke Army Medical Center, welcome aboard the International Space Station. I have you loud and clear.
Well, welcome, Colonel Morgan. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to speak to the Brooke Army Medical Center, the home of strategic medical readiness. You have a packed auditorium of staff, patients, and family members excited to ask you questions about your experiences in space. So, Colonel Morgan, we turn it over to you.
It is an honor to have Brooke Army Medical Center, the gold standard in military trauma and burn care, aboard the International Space Station with me. I consider myself a soldier, physician, and an astronaut, and I learned to meld those first two, soldier and physician, right there at Fort Sam Houston. My ties to that area go back several decades. I'm the son of a retired Air Force Dental Corps officer, and my father was stationed at Lackland Air Force Base at one time, so I became familiar with the area back in the 1980s, and then in my own career, of course, as a medical corps officer, my professional military and medical education have taken me to Fort Sam Houston and Brooke Army Medical Center multiple times. And then now, of course, as a staff physician in the Department of Emergency Medicine. When I was selected as an astronaut in 2013, I decided to hang my hat and credentials right there at Brooke Army Medical Center. So it's a real honor for me to share this experience with you all.
Colonel Morgan, this is Colonel Mike Worth, Advanced DCO. That's great, Colonel Morgan. Thank you for that. Hey, before we start asking the first questions, look at this.
Fire away with the questions.
Hey, good morning, sir. From San Antonio, this is Specialist Ezra Mays. And my question for you today is, how did your military training help get you ready for your time in space? And go Army, beat Navy.
Indeed, it is beat Navy season. I'm 100% product of a military education, from my undergraduate to my medical school to my residency training to my tactical and operational training. 100% a product of the military system. And that was the decision I made first. Like I mentioned, I first made the decision to become a soldier, and then a physician, and then later an astronaut. And I made the decisions in those orders for a reason. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to serve as a physician to soldiers. And everything that I have brought to the table as an astronaut is a result of that experience.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Sharp. I'm 15 years old, and my question is, how often do you see the sun rise and set in a 24-hour period?
So we're traveling at 17,500 miles per hour at an orbital altitude of about 250 miles straight up. And we orbit the Earth every 90 minutes. So we see a sunrise or a sunset about every 45 minutes. We make a full orbit of the Earth every 90 minutes. So it's a spectacular view both day and night when we look out the window here.
Good morning, sir. This is Sergeant Wirtz. I have a two-part question. First one, how do you stay fit in space? And my second is, are you going to be ready for the ACFT when you return to Earth?
So I need to work out a lot up here in order to be ready for that test when I get back. We work out 2 hours a day. We do both resistance training on a device called the Advanced Resistive Exercise device that uses a system of vacuum to create resistance for us, as well as cardiovascular exercise on a bike where we use clip-on pedals to connect us to the bike, as well as a treadmill where we use a harness to hold us to the treadmill itself. So 2 hours a day dedicated, staying fit in space, critical to our health when we return to Earth.
My name is Fiona Bell. I'm 6 years old. What does Earth look like from space?
I can remember the first time I saw it when we were still in our spacecraft coming to the International Space Station and seeing how far below the clouds were and seeing the sunlight come in the window, just like the sun comes in through your window at home, up there in space. It was incredible. We have multiple windows here on the International Space Station where we can look at the Earth. And like I mentioned, during day and night, it's beautiful. At nighttime, cities light up the ground. No matter where we are, it is absolutely incredible.
Good morning, Staff Sergeant Kirkendall. I have a two-part question for you. Have you noticed any difference with your sleep quality, and is being weightless somehow more relaxing or quiet?
Yeah, that's a great question. In general, I would tell you that now my sleep pattern is much the way it is on Earth. I go to bed about the same time. We operate on Greenwich Mean Time, so a couple hours, 6 hours ahead of your time. And so I go to bed around the same time I do on Earth, and I wake up about the same time. I generally get about 7 or maybe 7.5 hours of sleep at night. What I do find is that without the effects of gravity, I find that I toss and turn less, and I think that in many ways that my sleep is actually more restful.
My name is Jacob Spankwitz. I am 10 years old. What types of projects are you working on while you're there? What is your favorite?
Well, we've got a variety of science payloads on board the International Space Station, and they range all different types of science, physical science, earth science. We do technology demonstrations, but a lot is in the realm of biology and human research. And I have been able to participate in several of those, and some of those were the subject of. One in particular that I participate in is called Fluid Shifts, and it studies how fluid physiology and our cardiovascular physiology changes in space. And we're finding some very interesting things. In fact, there was a recent release about an article about how blood flow changes in our necks as a result of the fluid shift, the headward fluid shift that we get when we come to into microgravity. And so there's a lot of, what that tells us is that there are a lot of unanswered questions about how our bodies change in space.
Aloha, sir. My name is Major Higa. I'm a neuropsychology fellow here at BAMC. And so kind of going off of that, with changes of blood flow and any other environmental factors, I was wondering if you noticed any cognitive changes and or maybe perhaps future research on cognition.
Yes, very interesting and very relevant. We, just amongst ourselves, astronauts say that when we first arrive on the space station for the first couple of weeks, we have something called space brain, where we just find that it's harder to process things, and we don't have a good explanation for it. It's probably a variety of things about the environment. The fluid shift could have a relationship with that. In general, the atmosphere has a little bit higher carbon dioxide content, and perhaps that contributes as well. But we also don't know very well, the absence of a gravity vector in our brains, how we organize our thoughts. And we have a number of neuroscience projects going on that I'm participating in that help us understand better how do we perceive time as a result of the absence of gravity. So lots of unanswered questions, and I will tell you, though, that my experience has been after 6 to 8 weeks, I felt like I was thinking normally, but in general, when I first arrived, I felt like things were slower, things were harder for me to process.
Hey, sir, Staff Sergeant Porterfield of Fort Sam, Houston, WTB here, and I have a two-part question for you. Is it common for people to get sick in space? And are you prepared for a medical emergency?
Yeah, of course, as an emergency physician, that's a question that's near and dear to me. And we kind of tackle medical problems with a three-pronged attack. One, we always make sure that we're sending very well pre-screened astronauts health-wise in space. So we use preventive medicine up front to make sure that we're a highly pre-screened population to try to reduce the risk once we're on board. Then once we're on board, somebody is always designated as the crew medical officer. While that's not always necessarily a physician, in the case that, because I'm a physician, I'm a natural fit for that. But if there wasn't a physician on board, we would have somebody else trained. And we have robust telemedicine capability to speak with the flight surgeon on the ground by voice or with a video conference. We have medications pre-positioned on board, as well as simple things like an AED and basic interventions we can make up here. Then in an extreme scenario, if we were to, say, run into a surgical emergency, we do have, of course, the capability of returning that astronaut and their crew to the ground. We always have our vehicles that we arrived on attached to the space station, so we could get somebody on the ground within a day if it were absolutely necessary.
Hi, my name is Shelby Hoffman. I am 13 years old. I am researching different barriers which have been broken on the ISS, such as social, political, and technological. What barriers have been broken on the International Space Station?
Well, certainly I think one of the most important is the international partnership of the International Space Station program. 15 countries came together as part of this partnership, and then the major space agencies, NASA, the Japanese Space Agency, the Canadian Space Agency, the Russian Space Agency, and the European Space Agency that routinely provide astronauts. My crew right now is international. There are 3 Americans, 2 Russians, and an Italian astronaut on board with me. And I think what we are demonstrating up here is that no matter what happens on the ground, we are capable of coming together as nations and solving some really complicated problems. And we've maintained this International Space Station up here with a continuous human presence on board for 20 years now. And I think that's a remarkable feat, and I think it will be one of the lasting legacies of the International Space Station program.
Good morning, sir. My name is Staff Sergeant Monica Nixon-Dennis, medical laboratory technician assigned to the Warrior Transition Battalion. My question for you as the first Army doctor in space, how do you think your medical background is beneficial to the mission?
Well, I alluded to the role of the crew medical officer, and that's actually a minority of my duties up here. We're all trained to do the same job. We all spacewalk, we all do robotics, we all operate the payloads on board. Certainly my medical background comes into play, especially when we're doing human research related things, and if there is a medical concern on board, my expertise will be helpful. But as we explore deeper and deeper into space, and we return to the moon as part of the Artemis program, and then eventually on to Mars, and we go deeper into space, the capability of telemedicine and the ability to evacuate a patient are going to become more and more difficult. And I think that the role of a physician as part of the crew will become more and more critical. Certainly, my experiences as a physician have informed a lot of the way that I think and the way I approach problems. And on board the ISS, we are a crew of diverse backgrounds, and we come together to make a very capable team as a result of our diverse backgrounds. And in my case, I contribute my military medical background.
My name is Haley Suspenkwitz. When did you realize you wanted to become a doctor, and how did you decide to practice medicine in the Army?
I think I was in high school around the time that I started to get an interest in medicine, but it wasn't really until I was a cadet at West Point that I decided that was probably something that I wanted to pursue. And while I was a cadet, I knew that I wanted to be a physician to soldiers on the battlefield, operational as far forward as I could get. And that was what I pursued, and that turned out to be the most incredibly rewarding career. And I can't say enough about how wonderful the experiences I had were, and that I've made friends for life, and I felt like I served my country, very proud of that, and I can't say enough about what an important part of my life that was, and I would encourage anybody to pursue a career in military medicine for sure.
Hi, I'm Terry Riccio, IDES Deputy Director, and on behalf of my 2 granddaughters, Audrey 6, Lauren 5, we're going to ask you a question everyone wants to know. Do you think we're alone in space, or do you think there's life on other planets?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the fact that is an unanswered question is one of the things that helps drive us to exploration, and I think that it's better that the question is unanswered so we continue to search for answers. Well, I can't tell you what a pleasure it has been to speak with you all. Joint Base San Antonio, the San Antonio community, the San Antonio military community, Fort Sam Houston, Brooke Army Medical Center, all have been part of my life for decades, and it's been my honor to represent you up here. And just thank you so much for pursuing the opportunities that we could meet up in space.
event as we count down to 20 continuous years of humans living and working on the International Space Station.